Bernardo Provenzano, the mastermind who ran Cosa Nostra from the shadows for over 4 decades, finally met his end, but not before leaving an indelible mark on the underworld. From orchestrating mafia wars to communicating through cryptic pizzini, this elusive mob boss ruled Sicily with an iron fist. Join us as we explore the extraordinary life and capture of Provenzano, a man whose secrets died with him. Bernardo Provenzano, one of the most notorious and feared leaders of Cosa Nostra, left an indelible mark on the criminal underworld before his death at the age of 83 in the San Paolo hospital in Milan. His death, in July 2016, signaled the end of an era for the Sicilian mafia, where his name had long been synonymous with power, cunning, and brutality. Over 4 decades of his life, Provenzano was both a ghost and a legend, a man who managed to stay one step ahead of the law even when Italian authorities were determined to bring him to justice. Provenzano's story is particularly fascinating because, despite his immense power and control over the organization, he operated in secrecy, keeping his face hidden from public view for over 43 years. After all that time, his downfall finally came in 2006, when Italian police discovered him hiding in a modest and isolated farmhouse in the Sicilian countryside, remarkably close to his hometown of Corleone. The discovery was both shocking and symbolic, considering Corleone's historical significance as a birthplace for some of the most infamous mafia leaders, including the infamous Salvatore Riina, Provenzano's predecessor. Upon his capture, Provenzano was sentenced to 20 consecutive life sentences, a fitting end for a man who orchestrated untold violence and mayhem over the years. His life behind bars was anything but ordinary. He was subject to the harshest conditions under Italy's 41 bis law. The law, designed specifically to prevent mafia bosses from continuing their operations from prison, isolated him almost completely. His only contact with the outside world was through brief, heavily monitored phone calls with his family, conducted behind a thick glass partition. Even these small allowances were restricted to once a month, as the authorities were well aware of his incredible ability to maintain control over his criminal empire, even while in prison. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Provenzano's leadership was his ability to evade law enforcement for so long by using the most rudimentary means of communication. In an era of wiretaps, surveillance, and advanced technology, he relied on the humble pizzini, small scraps of paper containing cryptic messages that he would send to his associates. These notes were almost impossible to decode without knowing the specific context or key, often containing biblical references or disguised instructions. It was a system that harkened back to the days of old-world mafia traditions, proving that even in modern times, Provenzano's adherence to the old ways helped him evade the authorities. His Bible, found in his hideout after his arrest, was filled with underlined verses and personal annotations, further emphasizing his calculated and strategic mind. In many ways, Provenzano's life was a paradox. He was a figure who represented both tradition and modernization within the mafia. Under his leadership, Cosa Nostra moved away from the violent, headline-grabbing actions that had characterized the rule of previous mafia bosses like Riina. Instead, Provenzano focused on embedding the organization into legitimate business structures, expanding its influence in less visible but equally dangerous ways. This quieter, more calculated approach allowed Cosa Nostra to thrive, even as authorities cracked down on mafia activities across Italy. Yet, despite his low profile, Provenzano's influence was immense. He was not just a mafia boss, he was the boss of bosses, the man who made final decisions on matters ranging from international drug trafficking to local disputes. He was a mastermind, a tactician who preferred to act in the shadows, pulling the strings of a vast and secretive network that stretched far beyond Sicily. His death, while inevitable given his declining health, marked the end of a chapter in the mafia's long and bloody history. But Provenzano's legacy lives on, not only in the pages of history but in the streets of Sicily, where the power he once wielded still casts a long shadow. His ability to evade the law for so long, his cunning methods of communication, and his strategic mind made him a figure both feared and respected in equal measure. The story of Bernardo Provenzano is one that reminds us of the dark undercurrents that still flow beneath the surface of modern Italy, a country that continues to wrestle with the enduring legacy of the mafia. Bernardo Provenzano, born the third of 7 brothers, was destined to play a key role in the ever-evolving and turbulent history of Cosa Nostra. His rise to power, though marked by patience and cunning, was anything but peaceful. Over the course of decades, he survived multiple internal wars, betrayals, and violent struggles for dominance, all while maintaining a steady climb up the mafia's ruthless hierarchy. Provenzano's journey from a low-ranking foot soldier to the top of the Sicilian mafia was not an overnight transformation. It was the result of decades of loyalty, brutality, and an uncanny ability to adapt to the shifting landscapes of the underworld. In 1958, Provenzano found himself at the heart of a bloody turning point in mafia history. Alongside his infamous ally, Salvatore Toto Riina, Provenzano participated in a calculated and deadly ambush that would forever alter the balance of power within the Corleone family. The two men were part of a group that brutally eliminated the reigning leadership of the family to pave the way for a new regime, led by Luciano Leggio. This violent coup was not just a simple power grab, it was a declaration of a new order in the mafia world, one that would lead to more bloodshed as the newcomers sought to solidify their control. The murders, however, were only the beginning. In their quest for power, Provenzano and his associates were ruthless, setting off what would later be known as the First Mafia War. More lives were lost as the Corleone faction crushed its enemies with unrelenting violence, signaling to everyone in the mafia that they were not to be trifled with. This period of upheaval cemented Provenzano's position within the inner circle of Cosa Nostra, and his loyalty to Riina during this time would pay off handsomely in the years to come. By 1974, Salvatore Riina had successfully taken over as the head of the Corleone family, and as a reward for his unwavering loyalty, Provenzano was elevated to the role of second-in-command. While Riina was the face of the family, dominating the headlines with his brutal tactics and audacious criminal enterprises, Provenzano worked more quietly in the background. According to the testimonies of mafia defectors and justice collaborators, it was Provenzano who was often responsible for maintaining delicate relationships between the mafia and various government institutions. He skillfully navigated these complex ties, ensuring that Cosa Nostra's influence reached beyond the criminal world and into the corridors of political power. As Provenzano's role evolved, so too did his nickname. Once known as Il Trattore or the Tractor, a reference to his early reputation for mowing down anyone who stood in his way, he adopted a more refined moniker as his power grew. Il Ragionier or the Accountant became his new identity, likely a reflection of his sharp business acumen and his talent for managing the mafia's growing wealth. Under his guidance, Cosa Nostra's financial operations flourished. He became the mastermind behind securing public contracts and overseeing a network of lucrative investments, quietly amassing both power and fortune for the organization. The 1970s marked a critical turning point not only for Provenzano but for Cosa Nostra as a whole. The mafia, always adaptable, began to shift its primary focus from the more traditional tobacco smuggling operations to the far more profitable heroin trade. The production and distribution of heroin became a goldmine, and Cosa Nostra's wealth skyrocketed to unprecedented levels. This new venture, though immensely profitable, also brought increased scrutiny from law enforcement and rival criminal organizations, making the mafia's operations more dangerous than ever before. Yet, throughout these tumultuous times, Provenzano managed to remain in the shadows, rarely drawing attention to himself despite his growing influence. His ability to blend into the background, to quietly pull the strings while others took the spotlight, became one of his greatest strengths. Unlike Riina, who relished in his notoriety and reputation as a ruthless killer, Provenzano preferred to operate with discretion. His low profile allowed him to continue controlling and expanding Cosa Nostra's operations even as the Italian government intensified its efforts to dismantle the mafia. Provenzano's rise to power was not just a story of violence and crime, it was a testament to his ability to adapt to the ever-changing world around him. From his early days as a trusted enforcer for Riina to his later years as the behind-the-scenes strategist, Provenzano exemplified the cold, calculating nature of Cosa Nostra's leadership. His transition from the tractor to the accountant was not just a change of nickname, it symbolized the evolution of his role within the organization, from a man who solved problems with brute force to one who wielded financial and political power with precision. As Cosa Nostra's wealth grew and its operations became more sophisticated, Provenzano continued to rise, proving that in the world of the mafia, survival was not just about strength or violence. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and an unshakable loyalty to those who held the real power. As Cosa Nostra's financial empire grew in the early 1980s, so too did the ambitions of its leaders, and it was only a matter of time before these ambitions led to conflict. The Corleone family, led by Salvatore Toto Riina and his trusted second-in-command, Bernardo Provenzano, initiated the Second Mafia War between 1981 and 1983, a period of unprecedented violence and bloodshed that reshaped the landscape of Sicily, turning its idyllic countryside into a battlefield. With calculated precision, the Corleones waged war against their rivals within Cosa Nostra, determined to eradicate any who dared challenge their authority. This ruthless campaign culminated in the deaths of over 1,000 individuals, making it one of the deadliest chapters in the mafia's dark history. The violence of the Second Mafia War left no part of Sicily untouched. What was once a serene and picturesque island, known for its lemon groves and sun-kissed beaches, became a scene of terror and carnage. The streets of Palermo echoed with gunfire, as bodies piled up in the wake of assassinations, and the fear of death became an everyday reality for both mafia affiliates and innocent civilians alike. The Corleones' approach to warfare was absolute, no one was spared. Their goal was not just to win, but to obliterate their enemies, wiping out entire families and consolidating their power over Cosa Nostra. But this brutal campaign extended beyond the mafia's internal disputes. The Corleone faction, particularly under the ruthless hand of Riina, was bold enough to directly challenge the Italian government. They knew that as long as anti-mafia crusaders continued to speak out and push for new laws, their reign would remain under threat. High-profile assassinations followed. One of the most significant was the murder of Pio La Torre, a prominent communist congressman and a fierce advocate for anti-mafia legislation. La Torre had drafted laws aimed at dismantling Cosa Nostra's stranglehold on Sicily, and for his efforts, he was gunned down alongside his driver, Rosario di Salvo, in broad daylight. This killing sent a powerful message: Cosa Nostra would not be tamed by politics. The violence did not stop there. General Mario Alberto Dalla Chiesa, sent to Sicily to break the mafia's grip on the island, was also targeted. He had become a symbol of the government's efforts to combat organized crime, and in response, Cosa Nostra made an example of him. In a coordinated attack, Dalla Chiesa, his wife Emanuela Seti Carraro, and their bodyguard, Domenico Russo, were slaughtered. It was a brazen demonstration of the mafia's willingness to go to war with anyone, even the state itself. The island of Sicily, already stained with the blood of mafia rivalries, now found itself plunged into even deeper chaos as the line between criminal and civilian was blurred. However, the mafia's blood-soaked reign of terror would not go unchecked forever. The Italian government, spurred on by the courage and persistence of anti-mafia heroes such as judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, began to fight back. Both men were instrumental in leading the anti-mafia pool, a specialized team dedicated to bringing down the mafia's most powerful figures. Their work led to the eventual arrest of Salvatore Riina in 1993, a significant victory for law enforcement and a massive blow to Cosa Nostra. But this victory came at a cost. Riina's arrest triggered a violent backlash from the mafia, culminating in the assassination of Falcone and Borsellino in brutal car bomb attacks that shook Italy to its core. Their deaths were a grim reminder that the mafia would not go down without a fight. Riina's capture, however, left a void within Cosa Nostra. With their feared leader behind bars, the organization found itself in a state of disarray, and many of its members were eager to seize control. The ensuing power struggle was inevitable, with numerous contenders vying for the coveted position of boss of bosses. But as bloodshed and arrests claimed many of these would-be successors, one man remained notably absent from the chaos: Bernardo Provenzano. Ever the patient strategist, Provenzano chose to bide his time, allowing his rivals to fall by the wayside. When the dust finally settled, he emerged as the undisputed leader of Cosa Nostra. Provenzano's rise to the top was a testament to his intelligence and long-term vision. Unlike Rina, who reveled in the brutality of street warfare, Provenzano understood that too much bloodshed was bad for business. His philosophy was simple: violence draws attention, and attention brings the police. And police, especially in the form of determined prosecutors like Falcone and Borsellino, were the last thing Cosa Nostra needed. Provenzano took a different approach, one that emphasized discretion and subtlety. He reigned over Cosa Nostra for the next 2 decades with an iron fist, yet managed to avoid the same spotlight that had led to Rina's downfall. His ability to evade capture for 23 years, while ruling one of the world's most notorious criminal organizations, speaks volumes about the deep-rooted culture of silence and protection that enveloped the mafia. Known as omerta, this code of silence ensured that Provenzano could operate in the shadows, protected by a network of loyalists who shielded him from the prying eyes of law enforcement. Despite countless efforts by the Italian authorities, Provenzano remained a ghost, always just out of reach. It wasn't until 2006, after years of tireless pursuit, that the police finally closed in on him. His capture, in an isolated farmhouse just a stone's throw from Corleone, was a symbolic end to an era. The mafia, once so powerful that it could openly defy the government, now found itself increasingly under siege. But even with Provenzano's arrest, the story of Cosa Nostra was far from over. His life, and the decades of terror and control he oversaw, highlighted the complex and enduring relationship between the mafia and Sicily, a relationship built on fear, loyalty, and an unspoken understanding that, in many ways, continues to this day. Cosa Nostra, like many criminal organizations around the world, thrives on a foundation of fear, a pervasive and inescapable atmosphere that seeps into the very fabric of everyday life in regions under their control. In Sicily, this fear was not simply a byproduct of the mafia's violence, it was a carefully cultivated strategy, a tool of power that kept entire communities in check. The unspoken rule was simple but brutal: if you see something you shouldn't have, keep quiet and carry on as though nothing happened. Speaking up, even just whispering what you knew, could spell your death. Looking the other way became a survival instinct, a means of ensuring not just safety, but life itself. This deep-rooted attitude has a name in Italy: omerta. It's more than just silence, it's an unwritten code that governs behavior in places where the mafia holds sway. It is the silent pact that ordinary citizens make with the mafia, whether willingly or out of fear, to preserve their lives and the lives of their families. In truth, translating omerta into English is almost impossible. The phrase code of silence comes close, but it lacks the weight, the cultural significance, and the implicit threat that the word carries in Italy. For the police, the judiciary, investigative journalists, and any brave citizen willing to fight back, omerta was, and still is, the most formidable obstacle in the battle against the mafia. To understand just how pervasive omerta was in Provenzano's time, you need only look at footage from Italian television news in the 1980s. Reporters, microphones in hand, would rush to the scene of a mafia killing, often in the middle of a bustling town square, in broad daylight. Dead bodies lay on the ground, their brutal murders witnessed by countless onlookers. But when the reporters approached those witnesses, asking if they had seen anything or if they knew what had happened, the response was always the same: "No, I know nothing." It didn't matter how many people were present when the crime occurred, or how obvious the violence was. Omerta held everyone in a vice-like grip. Time after time, the cameras captured the same scene, the same denials, as if the very act of witnessing had erased itself from memory. This collective silence, a wall of fear and self-preservation, was Provenzano's greatest shield. For 43 years, he evaded capture, not because he was hiding in some far-off land or moving constantly from place to place, but because of the simple truth that no one was willing to betray him. In all likelihood, he spent much of his time in hiding not far from his home in Corleone, blending into the community that had sworn to protect him through its silence. He wasn't just another fugitive on the run, He was a man living among the people, confident that their loyalty, or more accurately, their fear, would keep him safe. Provenzano's ability to move freely, even across borders, was perhaps one of the most astonishing aspects of his time on the run. In 2002, for instance, DNA evidence now suggests that he traveled to Marseille, France, for surgery. How could a man so wanted by Italian authorities, a man whose face had been plastered across every wanted poster and newscast for decades, manage to leave the country undetected? The answer, once again, lies in the extensive network of protection that surrounded him. It wasn't just local villagers keeping quiet. Provenzano's reach extended far beyond the streets of Sicily. He had allies in high places, and it is widely believed that his evasion of justice for so long would have been impossible without help from individuals at the highest levels of society. Politicians, law enforcement officials, and even members of the clergy may have been complicit in ensuring that Provenzano remained untouchable. Despite his eventual capture, the question of how he managed to evade authorities for so long remains one of the most troubling mysteries in Italy's fight against organized crime. Investigations into these networks of protection are ongoing, and while some have been exposed, many remain hidden in the shadows, protected by the very system that allowed Provenzano to rise to power. His 43 years of freedom were not just the result of mafia loyalty or omerta, they were the result of a deeply entrenched system that shielded him from the full force of the law. Provenzano's ability to cross borders, seek medical treatment, and evade one of the most intense manhunts in Italian history speaks volumes about the power of silence, fear, and loyalty in the world of Cosa Nostra. His capture, though a significant victory for Italian law enforcement, was also a stark reminder of the challenges that remain. Omerta may have been weakened, but it is far from dead, and the legacy of that silence continues to haunt Italy's fight against the mafia to this day. As with all criminals, no matter how meticulous or cunning they are, the smallest misstep can lead to their downfall. Even someone as elusive and cautious as Bernardo Provenzano, who had spent decades mastering the art of evasion, could not control every single detail of his life in hiding. Sometimes, it's not grand schemes or high-tech surveillance that leads to an arrest, but something as simple and ordinary as a basket of laundry. In 2006, after nearly half a century of eluding capture, it was this mundane object that finally gave him away. Provenzano's family, in an old-fashioned but comforting gesture, would send clean laundry to his hideout. Police, after years of painstaking work, followed this basket straight to his doorstep, closing in on the man who had become a ghost for nearly 43 years. His arrest was a triumph for law enforcement, but it also raised questions about the future of Cosa Nostra. Following Provenzano's capture, attention quickly shifted to another shadowy figure, Matteo Messina Denaro, believed to have taken the reins of Cosa Nostra. Much like Provenzano before him, Denaro became an invisible man, a master of hiding in plain sight. For over 2 decades, Denaro has been on the run, managing to evade the same relentless manhunt that eventually caught up with his predecessor. There are no recent photographs of him, no clear signs of his whereabouts. He remains a mystery, an unseen force pulling the strings of one of the world's most infamous criminal organizations. The parallels between Denaro and Provenzano are striking. Both men wielded immense power, yet both preferred to operate in the shadows, maintaining control through fear and discretion rather than public displays of brutality. During his imprisonment, Provenzano remained as tight-lipped as ever. He refused to cooperate with investigators, staying true to the mafia's code of silence until his last breath. For a man like Provenzano, revealing the inner workings of Cosa Nostra was never an option. His loyalty to the organization was absolute, and even as he faced the end of his life, he kept the mafia's darkest secrets locked away. In the end, those secrets died with him. No amount of interrogation could pry them loose, and as Provenzano passed away, he took with him the knowledge that law enforcement had spent decades trying to uncover. There is perhaps no safer place for secrets than the grave, and with Provenzano's death, any hope of using his insights to dismantle Cosa Nostra faded. His silence in life was echoed in death, a final act of loyalty to an organization that thrives on secrecy, violence, and fear. The mafia's power, after all, is not just built on money or murder, it is sustained by the veil of mystery that surrounds it. Provenzano's refusal to betray that mystery ensured that Cosa Nostra would continue, despite the government's best efforts to dismantle it. The frustration of law enforcement is palpable. Provenzano's death was not just the loss of a notorious criminal, it was the closing of a door that could have offered critical information about how Cosa Nostra operated in its most recent years. With his passing, the mafia's secrets remained buried, leaving investigators to continue their battle against an organization that has proven resilient time and time again. Provenzano's silence, both in life and in death, became one of Cosa Nostra's greatest victories. The power of the mafia, after all, lies not only in its ability to control through fear, but in its ability to remain impenetrable to those on the outside. As law enforcement agencies both in Italy and around the world have come to realize, the death of a mafia boss doesn't signify the end of the organization. If anything, it often serves as a mere chapter in its long, bloody history. With Matteo Messina Denaro now believed to be at the helm, Cosa Nostra continues its operations, cloaked in secrecy and supported by a network of loyalists who understand the power of silence. Denaro, like Provenzano before him, is likely surrounded by individuals willing to protect him at all costs, keeping him one step ahead of the law. Provenzano's legacy, therefore, is not just one of violence and drug money, but of the enduring strength of Omerta. Even after his capture, even in the face of death, he remained loyal to the mafia's most sacred rule: never speak. His refusal to break that code, even when it could have potentially saved his life or lessened his sentence, demonstrates the deep-rooted culture of fear and loyalty that continues to define Cosa Nostra. His death may have removed a powerful figure from the mafia's ranks, but it did little to weaken the iron grip the organization still holds over parts of Italy and beyond. In many ways, Provenzano's final act of defiance, the act of taking his secrets to the grave, was a symbolic victory for Cosa Nostra. It was a reminder to the world that, no matter how many arrests are made, no matter how much effort is put into dismantling the organization, the mafia will always find a way to survive. As long as the code of silence remains unbroken, as long as men like Provenzano and Denaro continue to operate in the shadows, Cosa Nostra's influence will endure.